Laura Stegman, how you doing?
I am doing great. I am happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for clearing the time on what is undoubtedly a busy schedule as we approach the launch of your debut novel. So huge congratulations on that. That's a
Thank
big
you.
deal.
Thank you.
Probably the best place usually to get started is I don't make people listen to me summarize their book or their biography because how terrible in either case. So probably the best spot to get started is if you would tell the esteemed audience a little bit about your background or whatever we need to know Laura Stegman.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I I grew up wanting to be an actress and intending to be an actress, and that was my goal. I have a degree in drama, and after college, I acted all the way through high school and college, but after I started to try to make a living at it, I decided that it wasn't really the kind of life that I wanted to live. So I started working, at a special events organization. And I discovered that I had a real aptitude for doing that. And I had a boss there who said to me, you should really learn to do publicity. And my parents are both publicists, or they were when they were working. And I was like, no, I would never want to do that. But you know how that goes. And I ended up my next job after that was in a PR firm. And I was really lucky because I worked for a woman who allowed me to learn as I went. And I learned everything I know doing that. So eventually I started my own business, and I typically handle publicity for arts clients, classical music, theater, predominantly. I've also done a lot of special events, and mostly for nonprofit organizations. And that's what I do. That's what I've done for my entire adult professional life. And I love being a publicist because I've been lucky enough to have a lot of really good clients. But about 20 years ago, I started. I was writing as a publicist, press releases and pitch letters, and of course the whole PR business has changed over those years. And I ended up working with a friend on a blog, kind of stories, and I really enjoyed doing that. And at that time, I'm not sure why at that time, but it just popped into my head that I wanted to write a novel. And of course it would be a middle grade novel because middle grade literature, the stuff I read when I was a kid, I was still reading and I loved it. And I wanted to, write something that would make a kid today feel the way I felt about the middle grade books that I loved so much. So I started Summer of Luck back 20 years ago, and it's been a long journey.
20 years for Summer of Luck, from initial inception to the new version that releases. What's the release date?
September 15th. Yes. Yeah. I didn't know anything about writing fiction back then. That's, why it took a long time. But I loved it. I loved the feeling I got when I was working on the book. It was like a joy for me, to everything that I used to feel about acting when I did that. And I would play a part, and I mostly did theater acting. I'd go on stage and I would be that character, and the audience is there, but you don't really see them, and you connect with them, and it's an exhilarating feeling. And that's how I was feeling when I was working on Summer of Luck. And it took me a couple of years probably to come up with the first version of it. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And, I had some agent contacts and I sent it off to them, and I was anticipating, fame and fortune. And, it was suggested that I keep working. And so I did. I never stopped trying to make it better. About I think about 8 years ago. I mean, of course, there were long stretches of time when I was busy with my profession and, or just life. And
so you didn't spend 20 years at a desk staring at your computer.
No. In fact, the first few versions of Summer of Luck were written on a yellow legal pad. So anyway, I connected. I had I actually got my mother-in-law was a novelist, and a book of hers was handled by an agent, and this agent, he was always wanting to read everything, so he asked to read my book, and he read it, and he suggested that I work with a development editor that he knew. And that was like the best thing that ever happened, because this development editor was just a huge gift. He suggested that the book was almost at an outline form as far as the story goes. And he wanted me to, he used to say, open your fist. And he had me develop this story in a way that it never had been. The rewriting that I've done of this story, really truly began in my work with him. And then a few years after that, and this was the biggest key of all, was that I hooked up with other writers, and I connected with people in the writing community online. And I started getting, I entered every Twitter pitch contest and everything that I could to get feedback. And I got a lot of feedback, and I got critique partners, and I got beta readers, and I got feedback from agents, because I was querying at that time. And everything that I learned through that process, eventually brought me to about a year ago. I would say, let's see, I can't even remember what year it is. I mean, I remember it's 2020.
How could you forget?
How could you
it's
forget?
The year that will not end.
Exactly. I know, the horror show. But let's see, at the beginning of 2019 is when I really started getting interest from agents. I got a lot of requests, and I had never gotten that before. So I knew I was at a place, I was at a good place with the book. And then again, yet I kept getting rejected, but the input that I was getting, really helped. And after I made a decision last year to query 100 agents. And if I didn't get an agent at that point, I decided I was going to go to a small press directly. And that's what I did. That's what happened. Last October, I started querying small presses, and I got a lot of requests again. And I got one yes, and that was all I needed. And somebody who said, Intense Publications, my publisher, who has just been wonderful, they said, we love this. And, that was, and it was a yes. So that's really my journey to publication. I mean, in like 3 minutes, right?
Yeah, we might go back and pick through a little bit of that.
Sure, absolutely. Because there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the treetop story.
Oh, it's a good story with a happy ending, because here you are, you've got your debut launch after 20 years. You stuck with it, you persevered. And now, because you're on the Middle Grade Ninja podcast, I can only assume that great fame and fortune awaits you. So this is just wonderful.
The fact that somebody who I don't know will read this book that's, that's what I really wanted. And, as I kind of said, when I was a kid and I read all these books that I read, and the idea that I could make somebody feel the way I felt when I read my favorite books, which I continued to read over and over again until I, started reading. That's another part of my journey, is that once I started reading contemporary middle grade literature, that was really helpful too, because I was reading books from my childhood, which, is in the early part of last century. Not really, but
she said 2005, esteemed audience. That's what I heard.
So I've read a lot. That was very helpful to see what was selling, to see what people, and the good news was that I found a lot of books that gave me that same feeling that I had when I was a kid. So, that was really important. I mean, being an avid reader ever since I was a kid, I read voraciously. And I think because I never studied writing formally, I think being a good reader, being a reader like that was significantly important for me to learn how to even construct a sentence,
Sure, give me a voracious reader almost over an MFA student, and we'll be in good shape, although there tends to be a lot of overlap between MFA students and voracious readers. What books did you read in childhood, and then when you came back to contemporary middle grade, what were some standouts that may have influenced you in your writing?
My favorite book in the world is a book called The Diamond in the Window by a woman named Jane Langton. And again, we're talking deep into the last century that book was published. But the interesting thing about it is that when I read that book, no one else ever that I knew ever read it. I just found it in the library, and it had this gorgeous cover, library books, those smooth, not the plastic cover, but I don't know what they are, but I love library books with those kind of covers. And it was about two kids, and one of them was there was a sister and brother, and they were trying to save their house from the bank. And it's a fantasy story, just like Summer of Luck. And the girl in the book, she was always embarrassed that she had freckles, and I was always embarrassed that I had freckles. And I have freckles. And I was shocked that anybody else would be in a book, and have the same thing. And part of the story is that she learns to accept herself just like she is, with freckles and all. And that meant so much to me. And I never forgot that story. And I have read it over and over again. It's a wonderful book, again, from its time. So that was one of my favorites. And I was going to make a point about that, but I forgot. So I'll just.
That sounds like a book about learning to accept yourself would be pivotal for the writer that is to eventually go on to pen Summer of Luck, which
right.
Site spoiler is point. Maybe about learning to accept yourself.
Yeah, I mean that was my point. I just sometimes lose track. But you asked me what my favorite books were. So that was the number one. And then I also loved Beverly Cleary. And there was one Beverly Cleary book in particular called Ellen Tebbits, which was also about a girl who had a dark secret that her mother made her wear long underwear. And she used to hide in the closet at her ballet school so no one else would see her. And then it turned out that this other girl's mother made her wear long underwear, and she hid in the closet too, and they become friends. And that, just this kind of sense of real kid feelings and real kid problems. Like I had to read books really to and movies and things like that. I mean, I had a good childhood essentially, but I never developed a sense of accepting myself really for many, many years until I was an adult. And reading those books made it possible, at least for me, to know that it was possible to love yourself just like you were, instead of always trying to be, you know, maybe what my mom wanted me to be, or my dad, something like that. So, and then the other set of books that were my favorite as a kid were the All of a Kind family books, which were a series of books about a Jewish family growing up on the Lower East Side in the early part of the 1900s. And it was a really wonderful family story with just a lot of sentimental, you know, happy endings. I love happy endings. So
that is surprising to hear, since Summer of Luck ends so devastatingly. No, I'm not teasing.
Oh my God, really? Okay, so today I have three favorites that I've read in the past couple years. The first one is called The Miraculous by Jess Redmond, and it's about a little boy who has a tragedy in his family, and he just learns to believe in miracles again. I mean, you know, happy endings are relative sometimes, you know. I mean, it doesn't mean that everything turns out okay. It just means you figure out how to do life and be okay no matter what's going on. So that book just really touched me. I love books that make me cry. I also loved a book called A Patron Saint for Junior Bridesmaids, for Junior Bridesmaids by Shelley Togus. And that book is about a girl who is a Catholic, a very, you know, practices her Catholic faith very strongly. And she's going to be a junior bridesmaid in her cousin's wedding. And she keeps praying for solutions for her life problems. And she ends up learning about tolerance and compassion for others. She had an incident with a bully that she kind of regrets during the story. And anyway, again, it's the kind of happy ending that, you know, the bully didn't stop being a bully. The bully, you know, she just kind of learns compassion for a kid that was having the problems that this other kid was having. So that was a great, I love that book too. And I'm blanking on a third one, but that's enough of me talking about all the books I love. I
assure you, esteemed audience can't get enough of great book recommendations. I'm sure they've all got books at the side of their bed table like I do that are just stacked up with a promise of one day. But by God, if you make a good case for a book, then there's always room for one more on that stack.
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now called The Metropolitans. I haven't finished it yet, but I love it very much. I forgot who the author is, embarrassingly enough. And it's about 4 kids on the day that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. But it's a fantasy, and it's like a time-bending book, and it takes place at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And I love New York, so there's a lot of references to the city that are lots of fun to read, and it's very well written. So I'm really enjoying that.
So kind of tracing your journey just a little bit, because I'm fascinated by actors, because I had at one point for maybe all of a year, I thought I'll be an actor, and then I realized how much work was involved, and how much you had to have a tougher skin than I had, and I couldn't sing. There were a lot of factors in my deciding that it was better to focus on something else. But I had friends who have gone on, and some of them have had some success. My wife went to high school with the woman who played the maid in The Sopranos, who I guess also played a maid on, I think, Gilmore Girls and a couple of other things. So, a superstar adjacent, I would say. But I also know some actors who, gosh, I almost wish they'd pursued writing because it would be a little bit less rejection.
Yeah.
So When did you decide you wanted to be an actress, and what was the process of deciding that wasn't maybe so great?
My dad was a publicist in the movie business, and I just loved the idea of being a child actor. I mean, not that that had anything to do with his job, but he used to bring my sister and me into the studio and take us on sets. And it was just so glamorous, the idea of all this happening. And
any movie sets that esteemed audience might recognize?
Depends on how old they are. Let me think of the most. Mary Poppins was one of the biggest excitement of my young life.
Wow, that would be wow.
Yeah. Yep. Right.
That's part of your childhood. That's amazing.
Yeah, and Mary Poppins was the scene where they were in the Jolly Holiday section of the movie, where there were the cartoon characters and the penguins and the dancing and all that stuff. It was the part where Mary Poppins wins the horse race, and they were handing her a bouquet of flowers. But since they were animated, the characters that handed her the flowers, I'll never forget this. Julie Andrews standing there and going, thank you. And she received, this flower thing on a wire comes over, and it was just very memorable. And the children, the kids who played Jane and Michael were there, and I got to meet them. And, so it was just, and they were dressed in these just adorable outfits. And that's what I wanted to do. I want to be one of these kids. And of course, my parents would have none of that. You're going to school and you're going to study something that you can fall back on, So I never got to, the closest I got to being an actress when I was a little kid was, going to some class or something like that. But I used to pretend. I think this really does tie probably to my imagination as a writer, is that when I was a little kid, I would fall in love with some TV show, and if there was a kid on it, or even if there wasn't, I would make up a character, and I would imagine episodes in my head for the story of what I was. And at night, when I'd go to bed, I would act it out, So I had a very vivid imagination, and that was, what, and like I said, as I grew up and I got into acting classes in school and high school especially, and being in the acting clique, it's a real family. I have friends today that I had friends that were my friends back then, my acting friends. And, like I said, it made me feel special to be in a play, to be someone else, to act out whatever the character was. It just brought me a lot of joy. And then, and same for college. I did a lot of acting in college. And then after college, I live in Los Angeles. I've always lived in Los Angeles. I came back from college, which was near Los Angeles. And the opportunities to act in Los Angeles were commercials and movies and TV. And I'm kind of a character type. And I did not find that to be rewarding at all. I did not like the opportunities. I didn't like the having to put myself out there the way that you did. And I wanted more stability in my life. I found that the life of an actor wasn't as much as the glamour of it, when I was faced with the reality of it, there's really not a lot of glamour. It's hard work. And I wasn't I wanted stability at that point in my life. This was like in my 20s, as I said. So I got a job in an office, and I found that was the stability that I was looking for. You know, I knew where I was going every morning. I would have a paycheck at the end of the month or whenever. And, you know, I was really good at the things that I ended up working at. So, and ultimately, I ended up, this is why it's so ironic, because ultimately, I didn't want to work for anyone else anymore. And that's why I started my own business. So talk about instability. You know, my life is a series of contradictions. I can't even explain how it happened, but I've been so lucky, because once I started my own business, I you know, I had a lot of contacts. My parents connected me with, I said they were publicists. So they connected me with people, and that was really helpful. I bow down to them for, you know, for being, you know, they never hired me. They couldn't afford to do that, which was like the best gift they could ever give me, because I had to do it on my own. But they helped a lot. And then one client would lead to another. And, you know, here we are some 30 years later. And, you know, that's what I still do. And I liked, again, another contradiction. I like being behind the scenes. I didn't like putting myself out there. And one of the reasons I wanted to have an agent so badly was for my writing, was because I thought, well, if I have an agent, then someone else really thinks I'm good enough to publish this book, and then I can put myself out there. But I talked to a friend of mine, because she was really urging me to just somehow get this book into, you know, get this book published, whatever it was going to take. And I just kept going, no, you don't understand. I can't put myself out there. And she said to me, she asked me one day, why not? And I had to think about it for a minute. And I realized that there was no good reason that I couldn't do that. And as it turns out, I'm loving talking about my book. I'm loving, you know, doing all the things that I'm doing that normally I send my clients to do, and I give them all the checklists, you know, be sure to watch the show before you're on it and have some talking points. And, you know, and here I am, because I'm just talking to you about what is in my heart, as opposed to some business that I'm trying to remember what is the most important thing about them. So this is a gift to me. It's a treat. I love it. And, you know, that sort of speaks to some more significant parts of my story than I mentioned earlier.
There are so many good follow-up questions. One, I want to make a promise to esteemed audience that we will talk more about publicity. It's not lost on me that we have a publicist with a debut novel, and by God, we will talk about it. But I want to dive into the novel. But before we leave acting behind, I do wonder what skills from your time as an actress have you brought with you and have translated into writing? Because I'm of the opinion that every writer should do at least a little bit of acting, but I'll let you elucidate why.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case. I tend to be very visual about, you know, what I'm writing. I know exactly what the kids in my book look like. I know what the setting looks like. And when I'm writing, it helps me to envision what is going on inside them, just the way that I would if I was preparing for an acting role. Like, what's the gut feeling of this person at any given moment? And that, from those places, the words come out. And sometimes I can't necessarily think of the right words, or the words that end up being on the page, but so I just write down, you know, she feels sick, or she feels thrilled or whatever, whatever it is. I can't really think of anything right now, but, or she's scared, or, she's pissed off. Like when I was writing Summer of Luck, there was a lot about one of the characters, the girl character that I relate to a lot in childhood. And I just used to remember how it felt when this would happen or that would happen. And then, I would bring myself back to that moment. And again, like I was building a character to act. And so that's one of the important ways that's really helped me. Another thing is, what are they doing when they're sitting there talking? Are they scratching their head? Are they studying their nails? I mean, you need to refer to that stuff a lot if you're going to avoid saying he said, she said, that kind of thing. And or facial expressions, are they going like, it's easier to go than to write down what that looks like, so I have to start someplace, and I do it based on a lot of things I learned, when I was acting.
Gotcha. And you said you keep track of what everybody looks like, what your setting is, all of that stuff. Do you keep a journal of just notes to accompany the story, or do you just keep it all up in your head for 20 years? Or how do you keep track of it?
Summer of Luck evolved over time, remember? So that's I do make notes, but I'm not one of those writers that lays everything out. I mean, when Summer of Luck was being, the first time it was all, I mean, I had an idea of the arc of the story, but I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And as it turned out, if you look at that first draft of Summer of Luck, it's almost nothing like the story that came up today. The characters are the same, or at least the three main characters are the same. And the idea of, these kids learning to believe in themselves, that's the same. But other than that, it's all very different. And I forgot the question.
So just talking about how you're keeping track of the characters and everything else.
Oh yeah. So well, is this a good time? Maybe we should say what the book's about before I start.
No, I want to leave esteemed audience a complete mystery. No, yes, absolutely. Let's let them know.
Okay.
If you would give us an overview of the book.
Sure. So Summer of Luck is about three kids who are finding their way to self-acceptance with the help of a ghost who haunts a magical carnival. So that's the basic story, but it's about these three kids, and they all struggle with some kind of communication. The girl, Darby, is 11, and she stutters. One of the younger boy, Naz, he's 10 years old, and he has just moved to America from Morocco with his mom, and he speaks French and Arabic, but he's just learning English. And the second boy, the third of the three, is Justin, and he's 12. And right before the story starts, Justin's father has died, and he has completely stopped talking. So the three of them meet at summer camp, and the second that the three of them are in one place at one time, they start hearing this calliope music, like from a carousel. And all of a sudden, they can hear each other's thoughts. And so they're able to communicate telepathically like that, which, is convenient for
solves their
kids.
Communication problems nicely. Yes.
Yeah. And ultimately, they are able to communicate otherwise, but it's a part of the story that they're able to continue to do that through the story. And they have no idea where this music is or why this music is doing this. So they they sneak over to this abandoned warehouse next to their camp, and they sneak into the warehouse, and it's a big, beautiful, bright carnival, old-fashioned carnival with old-fashioned rides and old-fashioned, games and everything like that. And they meet this ghost who is used to be the owner, and his name is Leroy Usher Carnival King, and that's the L period, U period, C period, K period in the title. And he asks them for their help in reconciling his estranged adult children. And in return, he promises that he will help them find their voices. And so it is through his carnival rides, his magical carnival rides, that he takes them on these adventures, and they learn through what he teaches them. And as they learn themselves, how to find their voices. And that means different things to different kids, but that's the gist of the story. So when you asked me the question about how did I keep track, I had, 3 kids, and they're all at the summer camp, and they all have bunkmates. And I had to make up all these names for their bunkmates, and, I had to keep track of which characters were, who was the counselor. So things like that, I definitely made good notes on. And I also got a lot of advice to say, you got to eliminate some of these characters. There's too many, there's too many names. So, I did that. But I mean, anything that is that kind of, or a timeline, I had to figure out, well, first of all, the book takes place in 1999 for a reason that I'm writing a sequel to it, and the sequel has to take place around then because of other related things. But I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here. But the point is that I do keep track of things like that, but I know it's really common for many authors to write like a Bible for each character, and that's just it's not my way. I'm very spontaneous about the story. I find that writing, as I'm writing the sequel, because my wonderful publisher not only signed me for Summer of Luck, but for 2 sequels. So I am almost at the end of book 2, which continues the following summer. And
I hope you're still having fun if you've got a 3rd book yet.
I know. It's like, oh my God, what's the 3rd one going to be about? But as I write this book, I am amazed and this same feeling of joy when I'm writing a scene and I'm not really sure exactly how it's going to play out, but all of a sudden I'm typing. Now I do everything on a computer, not on a yellow legal pad, but it is a joy when something comes out of me that I had no idea what it was going to be. And that's what I love about writing. That's why being a novelist, it's not something I don't expect necessarily. Oops, sorry, I kicked at the camera. I don't know what's going to happen with it. I hope people read it. I hope they love it. And but it needed to come out, so that's why I do it. That's why I get a lot of joy out of it.
So are you kind of more, I feel like every author is somewhere on that spectrum between pantser and plotter. And I'm assuming you're a little bit closer to pantser than plotter. Do
Absolutely.
you do any kind of plotting?
Let me talk about the sequel right now without giving too much detail on it. But
First of all, none of the characters from book 1 are in it because they all died.
Sure, that was my happy ending. Actually, well, book one of the things that just to digress completely, one of the things that I learned about writing when I was working with a development editor, I had so many points of view in the first versions of Summer of Luck. I had the counselor's point of view. I had, the three kids. It was just like crazy. I didn't really understand about having, especially in middle grade, having, points of view that were clear and as minimal as they could be. And right now, I mean, not right now, because this is the book that's being published, but it's the points of view of the three kids. And every so often, the children of the ghost, the adult children, there will be points of view of them because the story's tied together like that. But, there's no counselor's point of view. There's no camp director's point of view. There's no wife of the older son's point of view. I mean, I had this scene in my first draft where, this woman was at a society luncheon. And the idea of that scene was to show why she was pushing her husband to sell the warehouse where the carnival is, where it was a motivation thing, completely unnecessary, but it just took me, this is the kind of thing that happened as I've been on this writer's journey. I've learned what belongs and what doesn't. And, I don't regret taking that scene out, but there's a number of other scenes that as I continued to make the book better and better, they didn't advance the story at all. There was a scene where the kids play tug of war, and it was a lot of fun. There was a scene where they play a baseball game, totally fun, but nothing happened that needed to be there. And so I had to axe those scenes. So,
always painful. Do you just delete them or do you keep them someplace
where
you can maybe eventually repurpose them?
Don't worry. Everything I've ever cut is in a file. I haven't looked at that file in a very long time, but, so for that book, like I said, it was a very long process. For this book, I'm technically on my first draft, although since my deadline, is sooner than 20 years, I have to, increase my speed and I have to polish a little as I go. But I knew at the beginning of this book, I had an idea of why I wanted to write Summer of Luck 2, which is called Ready or Not. And I decided it was going to be from the point of view of Justin, the older boy. And I decided that there were a lot of things that are happening in our world today, our country, that were really bothering me. And I wanted to write a story about a kid who wasn't experiencing that kind of thing. But how does a kid learn to be okay when a lot of things aren't okay? I mean, and COVID-19 just popped up to help me along with that, because that's another kind of, very challenging situation in so many ways. And so I knew that's what I wanted to write about, but I didn't exactly know how the story was going to play out. But I just started writing, and here I am, probably like 2 or 3 chapters from the end. I know what's going to happen now, but I haven't written a very pivotal chapter at the end, and I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I just know sort of that it's going to play out, and I'll find out when I get there.
You don't have notes. It's just, let's find out what happens today. I hope it's great.
No, I have it all. I have it written out in the sense of like, Justin does this and he talks to this and, and then this happens. And I have all these different things that the characters could say. I have all that written out, but I'm not going to use all of that. So how that ends up becoming a chapter, that remains to be seen. It will, that's how I've always written. And it just, and the other thing is that, especially in writing this book on a deadline, I wrote this whole scene, and I knew what I wanted to happen, but I just couldn't express it. I couldn't think of the words about what was happening were all on the paper, but not in the way you want your book to be written. And I just was so stuck, and I was like, I'd say to my husband every night, I can't write. It turns out I can't write. And I'm not good at this, and I'll never get. And he would say, just keep going. And I would, and the next night I would have my scene. So that happened enough that I've essentially learned to trust the process, just go edit something else if it's not coming out, or, read a book or whatever. And that's kind of how I write. I don't know if there's probably many other writers that are like that, but maybe not. I've definitely heard, I've listened to a lot of interviews with writers, and I've heard everything, from kind of like seat of the pants to plotters, who are very detailed. I've never taken I've never, gone to writing school, so I'm not really sure how that's taught, but I kind of like, I just like, it works for me. So
I frequently make the joke, and esteemed audience, regular esteemed audience members will have to forgive me because I've heard it before. But I always say that if I get 2 or 3 really successful authors in a row tell me they all do the same thing in the same way, then I'm done talking to authors. I'm just going to do what they're doing, and that's it. Hasn't happened yet. We'll see where we'll get there. Somewhere out there is somebody that writes every night in a coffin, and it's perfect for their process. And I haven't talked to them yet, but I'm sure that when they explain it to me, it'll make perfect sense for how their brain works. So
I have a theory, because I've heard enough. I heard an interview. In fact, it's one that you did with an author who said she wrote her book in 3 months or something like that, 3 to 6 months. And that woman has a gift. That woman has the writer's gift. My sister has the writer's gift. My sister's a novelist as well. And she teaches creative writing. She writes incredible short stories. She's 10 times the writer that I will ever be. She's a born writer. So shout out to
your sister. What is her name, Mark?
Her name is Susan Segal, and her book is called Aria, like the opera thing, Aria. And so check it out. And she also writes short stories, so you can find those by Googling her, I'm sure. But I'm the kind of writer that it doesn't come naturally. It takes a lot to come up with the kinds of things that end up being my final version of something. So, I think we all have to compensate for what our given level of talent is. And if that works for me, then I'm fine with that, really working with getting input from other writers and reading their stuff, the critique partner thing has been just a huge part of my ability to learn, to see what a critique partner says, how they interpret. Somebody that I trust says to me, that really doesn't read right. I'm not getting what you're trying to say. Or if they say, well, this person, why is he doing that? And I'm thinking to myself, well, don't you remember 3 chapters ago, they did this? And clearly they don't remember that. So instead of saying to them, you don't remember this, I have to look at that, and I have to figure that a middle grade kid, if an adult doesn't remember it, then maybe a middle grade kid isn't going to. So I gotta shuffle things around. I gotta strengthen that. I have to listen, and I have to not just think everything I write is like golden, because, you know, sometimes I think that, and then 3 weeks later I'm reading it and I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't work at all. And I have to rewrite it. So that's just part of the process.
Yeah, if I haven't congratulated myself on writing my most brilliant novel yet, at least 3 times, but also despaired that I've lost all the talent I ever had, and this will ruin me at least 3 or 4 times, that I'm not having the full experience.
Totally. And just, you know, the idea that I have to keep going, I have to keep at it, I have to never give up, because this is what I love and this is what I want to do. And it, you know, however long it takes, just like with my first book, you know, it just took what it took. And here I am, you know, on the less than a month away of having this book in print. You know, that's like, it's a miracle. I'm incredibly grateful. And I'm so glad that I didn't give up, that I didn't stop, you know, or that I didn't abandon this book. I mean, people would say, not people, but I did hear from one other writer, not somebody that I was working with, but just kind of, you know, the way that you connect with people online, you know, you need to move on from that book. It's not going anywhere. And I was like, no, I mean, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep working to make it better so that it is a book that somebody will want to purchase, you know, a publisher will want to purchase. So, and that's where I ended up going. So I absolutely, if anybody says to me, you know, should I just give this whole thing up? I'd say if it's what you want to do and you believe in this, your story, if it's a story you want to tell, keep going. Don't give up.
Well, I always think that if you can give up, go, be free. But most writers I know can't.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you know, that was sort of my point, that if it's a story you feel like you have to tell, you're not going to want to give up. But if you do want to let it go, then that's your answer, you know? And I know a lot of people write, I've heard a lot of authors, you know, they write several different books at once, or they work on one for a while and then they go to the other. I can't even imagine that. I mean, when I was writing Summer of Luck, I envisioned it as a series, you know, with a couple of sequels, but I still really thought that was all I had to say. And I couldn't imagine necessarily writing another book. But of course, here I am, my second book almost finished. And because it's the same characters and everything, and similar setting, you know, I thought, well, maybe that's the only story I ever have to tell, is Justin, Darby, and Naz. But now I had this idea the other day, spontaneously, like, of another story that is not about these 3 kids, and maybe it's not even middle grade. I don't know, but I'm going to see what happens with that. I mean, that's why it's so much fun to write, because, you know, there's no you're not in a box. You get to write about whatever comes out of your head. You know, I know you write a lot of different genres.
I try to. Keeps it fun and interesting, and at the end of the day, the number one person I'm writing for is mostly me. I've got some esteemed readers in mind always, but if I'm not happy, then what are we doing here?
Exactly. And that's it. It's like, that's me finding my voice of telling the story of Summer of Luck, and then the story of Justin in book 2. And, you know, we're going to go back to Darby's voice in book 3. I don't know what the story is going to
know, without spoiling, obviously, but how much do you know about book 3, writing book 2, and how much are you going to hate yourself if you don't set your third book up nicely in book 2?
the vision that I have for book 3 is that this whole, well, I'm not going to say this until I finish book 2, but it's going to be a whole other story, and it's not going to take place at camp, and it's not going to have much of Justin and Naz in it. It's going to be a Darby story.
Oh, so you've got pretty wide freedom then going into book 3.
Yeah. I have no idea what direction it's going to take, but I'll find out, like I said.
So having just written the third of the Banneker's, I had the experience of hitting past me. Why didn't you set me up better? Now I have to do extra setup here to cap this off. Let's see. I'm looking at our time, flying by as it always does. Quick pivot, and then we'll make good on my promise, and we'll talk about your promotion plan for Summer of Luck. But before we do that, Laura Stegman, have you ever seen a flying saucer and or a ghost?
I've seen Mr. Usher, Leroy Usher, Carnival King. He's the ghost.
Like in real life, you saw something that inspired him, or just in your imagination?
No, but I was looking forward to you asking me this question about the flying saucers because, again, aging myself, no, I've never seen a flying saucer or a ghost. But when I was a kid at Disneyland, they had this ride, Flying Saucers. And it was the most fun ride. It was like a bumper boats, but they were in the shape of flying saucers, and you would lean and the air would come up, and that's how you would move. It was such a fun ride. And that's my flying saucer story. So I've never seen a real one, but I've seen those.
I know Walt Disney was said to have been have a keen interest in flying saucers, because of course there were a couple of different cartoons that he went on to inspire. Then there were also a couple of episodes of the Magical World of Disney. But I think that's the show where he came on and narrated before the start. And they just did straight UFO documentaries before there were regular UFO documentaries, and that was part of the wonderful world of Disney.
Interesting. Well, he had a lot of interests that were, he was interested in trains. He was interested in trains. I can't think of anything else, but he obviously had quite an imagination.
But also animation and musicals. Or so I've always been told. That's part of what Fantasia was about. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. What an imagination. Yeah.
I tell you what, Mr. Disney, when you get thawed out, if you hear this and you'd like to come set the record straight, you are welcome on the show.
Clear your name, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. The publicist begins to promote her debut novel, and we should point out again, you do not publicize books. You do all manner of arts. But have you ever promoted any author, any book of any kind?
No, I haven't. And so, like with my writing, I mean, I kind of had to learn not learn by doing exactly, because the one thing you asked me about keeping notes. I have a notebook that I would say right after I signed my contract with Intense Publications, which was last October or November, anyway, last fall. And I started scouring the internet for websites and podcasts and other places that I was seeing authors do publicity. I have a bag full of notes that ultimately get transcribed into this notebook. But that anytime I would see something, I would make a note about it. And so when I put together my publicity plan, it had all these resources that I had already looked into and found, oh yeah, that's something where I'd like to do an interview on that show, or that blog or whatever. I knew, you know, from my own publicity work, I knew that, like, for example, in Los Angeles, there were some media outlets, print and otherwise, that were aimed at families and parents with kids. So I, you know, I knew, and I even knew who to pitch on those. But it's not that complex, you know, when you're looking at a website and there's a contact page, you can figure out who to pitch. But I think the thing that gives me the edge is that I knew that I couldn't just say, hey, I wrote a book, want to interview me? I mean, I knew that that wasn't going to fly. That, you know, I mean, that would clearly say amateur. So I put together a pitch letter that told my story, you know, I mean, not my story of being a writer, but the story of, you know, loving this book when I was a kid and wanting to write a book that would make some kid today feel the way I felt about it. I indicated the things that I could discuss during an interview, and I provided all kinds of background about myself, you know, bio, and establishing my credentials as a nonfiction writer. And yeah, that's, you know, that's what I would do for a client. You know, I would figure out what I wanted, where I wanted the client's publicity to appear, and I would come up with a pitch letter that was tailored to those media outlets. And sometimes it would be a little different depending on, like, for example, for the children's magazine in Los Angeles that I pitched. I mean, they don't care about what my writer's journey is. So I didn't include stuff like that, but they would be more interested, I think, in the idea of the kids' journey to self-acceptance, that the stories about, like, some kids who find a way to accept themselves. That's what a family magazine would be more interested in, whereas a writer's blog or something that focuses on writers' journeys, obviously that would be much more suitable to them. The you know, where I really would like to advance to, and this is something that I haven't quite gotten to yet, is getting my book into the hands of you know, when they have like 20 books to read this fall, like those kind of media outlets. I'm still learning about those, and I'm still exploring them. And again, just like with my writing, I'm turning to other writers. You know, what was your experience with that? I mean, being an author is like, what, 40% of it, you know, and the other half is keeping in touch with people, what's going on. You know, I got to be in this TikTok video because this writers group that I'm part of posted that a TikTok person was looking for writers it was a thing called Pass the Book Challenge. And we all held our books up, and we caught them, and then we dropped them. And each person in the video, you know, would catch the book, or, you know, their book. And it was just a cute little, like, I don't know, 1 minute TikTok video. It was my one chance at being an internet sensation. But it was fun. And it was something I just was like, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? How do, you know, where do I set my camera up? But now I know, you know, now I know how to do stuff like that. And every time I do something that, it's like Darby in the story, or all three kids in the story, every time I do something I don't think I can do, but I do it anyway, I learn a lot, and I feel really good about myself.
Well, until you do try to do the one thing that turns out you can't do, like swim with the shark, or...
I'm not a swimmer.
I think that's a good last thought to have, honestly, is, I really thought I could do that.
Well, and you know, like I said, I mean, there are some you know, writers whose books are purchased by, you know, the big five. I mean, they have a lot they have publicists, publicists who are book publicists. So, I'm not at that level, and maybe I will be someday, maybe I won't. But meanwhile, I can do the best I can for Summer of Luck and let as many people know about it as possible, putting myself out there, like I said, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, all that stuff. Not my comfort zone, but I'm doing it to the extent that I am comfortable with it.
You're being very humble, which I appreciate, but let me assure esteemed audience, as somebody who receives a fair amount of information from various book publicists, I found Laura's package to be extraordinarily insightful, and obviously it worked. I said, yes, absolutely, let's talk. In fact, let's go over a few of the things that came in that. Because you had a press kit that has a summary of the book. You've got a bio just about you. You've got automatically a cover. I'm always, it's not that big of a deal in the internet age because I could find a copy of your cover out there in the world. But it's always like, hey, would you promote me on your blog, Mr. Ninja? I don't have a cover of the book, just bare minimum. Help me out a little bit. This is a free thing I'm doing. I don't have all night. So we've got the cover, we've got a news release, and then we've got a sell sheet. So let's go through each of them. What is that, 5 things? I'm so bad at math.
I have the sell sheet is, again, I learned this from, Intense has a lot of different authors and the middle grade writers among us have kind of gotten together, and we're sort of sharing information, especially those of the ones who've had their books published sooner. So I learned about a sell sheet from that, and I'd never even heard of it before. But I just, I looked up examples of them, and I created that, and it's got the cover of the book. It's got, the blurb, like a 2-paragraph summary of the book. It has, what format is it available in? What are the prices? I have a quote from an endorsement type quote from another author. On that particular sell sheet, the book's available everywhere, but it has the publisher's contact information. And, it's just kind of like an all-in-one piece of information if somebody wants to, it's not like for the public per se, it's for someone who wants to know how to, if someone's writing an article about it, is it available in ebook? Is it available in paperback? Is it available in audiobook or whatever? Summer of Luck's available in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. So that's all on there. And it's who's the distributor? Ingram is our distributor. So anything that anybody would need to know if they were either writing about it or if they wanted to stock the book, a bookseller would need, if I was going directly to a bookstore, and if I could go into a bookstore in the this time of COVID and quarantine, that's what I would bring. I would bring that to them, and it would be a all in one place sort of sell sheet. It would be selling the book basically. So that's one thing. And the press release, basically has the announcement. I did one earlier on that announced that the book was acquired by Intense. But now
the press release at the time of it being acquired?
I did, yes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And now the one that is in the press kit is that it's available for pre-order when it went up for pre-order. And it is available. If someone's reading this 6 months into the future, you can get it pretty much anywhere, and you can right now too. But I have I made a connection with a bookstore, my local independent bookstore, and they're doing this pre-order where when I'll have a launch party through them on their Zoom account. And when people order after the launch party, I'll go in and sign all the books, and you can have the book personalized however you want it through that bookstore. It's called Children's Book World, just as an aside. So the press release has the pre-order information, but it really repeats everything from the first release. What's the book about, and who is Intense Publications. It has like a paragraph about them. It has a paragraph about me. So that's the press release. And then I also have a bio page, which has, I think 4 or 5 different versions of my bio with different lengths. So if someone needs 2 sentences, there's a 2-sentence bio. If someone needs a long paragraph, there's that. I mean, the point is that you want to make it easy for whoever's using this stuff, so they don't have to do anything. Oh, look, it's right there. I've got it. Copy paste, and you're set.
I want you to develop the ability to telepathically communicate with every author in the world, at least all the ones that are going to reach out to me in the future, and let them know that they should do this. And make it easy on the people that want to promote you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, why? This is like rule number 1 of being a good publicist. Make it easy for the journalists. Give them all the information that they need. Don't make them have to. I mean, their job is to write a story or to interview you, whatever. Just make it easy and make it all of it. And more, this because of this background where more is enough, more is what you want. That's why the first 12 versions of Summer of Luck had way more in it than could stay, because that was my training, but trying to think of what else, then, as you say, there's an image, a high resolution image of the cover. And then there's a couple of photos of me, and the photo credit, which is also really important. And they're also they're like variations in size. So if someone needs a web version, there's a lower resolution. If you need it for a print thing, there's the high resolution. So that's really important. And then there's the about page, which is just kind of a compendium of all this stuff. My elevator pitch, the 1-line version, another version that's a little bit longer. And then there's another explanation of the story that's a little longer than that. Just all different levels of those things. And then that's where I put my endorsements, quotes from other writers that have read the book and gave, laudatory endorsements, things I'd use on a book cover, things I use on just anything, just to let people know that, somebody read this book and actually thought it was pretty darn good.
Little social media, or little social proof. They like it. You'll like it too. And I want the esteemed audience to note that you were so humble before, talking about, I don't know, I'm just figuring this out. And as we listen to you, we can hear years of work as a successful publicist, training from childhood by 2 publicist parents. You fooled no one, Laura Stegman. You are fantastic at this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So just out of curiosity, because we talk a lot on this show about queries to agents, queries to publishers, but we don't talk a whole lot about queries to media outlets. So you put together this package. I assume you sent it just to me and said if I could get on Middle Grade Ninja, that's all the publicity I would ever need. But in case I'm mistaken there, how many? Do you have an idea, just ballpark, how many pitches you sent out?
I would say probably 30 and under, but I've been really lucky. I've been batting, whatever the percentage is. I think I've altogether, I've either done or am doing, I think about 15 interviews.
Perfect.
So, yeah, and there are different kinds of interviews. Sometimes I have to write the answers. There are Q&As that I write the answers to, and I have to, that's another thing is I can't answer a question, even though a lot of the questions are the same. I can't copy and paste from something I sent someone else, so there's a lot of work involved in that, and being interesting too, not just writing. Well, I was born in New York. I mean, you have no idea how many, you probably do have an idea because you probably get stuff like this, but I work with a lot of musicians in my work and, or actors, and I've always wanted to teach a class on bio writing. You do not start your bio by saying, I was born in New York. That's like the most boring thing ever. You want to start your bio with a line or two that gives the big picture,
But if I don't know what specific patch of soil within the country you originate from, how am I supposed to be interested? No, I'm teasing.
Well, you can put it at the end if it even matters. But yeah, I mean, like my bio, all 7 versions or however many there are on my little bio sheet, they all start with Laura Segal Stegman is an arts publicist and author. I haven't got it memorized, and her debut novel, Summer of Luck, will be released in September, to be followed by a sequel in 2021. I mean, that's the most important thing that people need to know about me. And then I go off on tangents, like I have this section where, people's bios are whatever makes them interesting. So I thought one of the more interesting things about me was, here are some of my favorite, that my parents instilled in me a love of reading, and here are some of my favorite middle grade books. And then I talk about my nonfiction credits, and then I talk about, my husband and I live in blah, 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 and I love Dodger baseball and classical music and theater. I don't have that much of an interesting life, but those are the most interesting things that other people would care about, bios are important where you pick out, this is just like with writing, you pick out what is the essential information and you write it well, and you have it so that if they only use the first line, they've got the essential information.
And then knowing, of course, that you've got 2 more books coming, are you saving the information from the folks that you found worthy of pitching to? Okay, it didn't work out this time, but maybe I come back to you around book 2? Or is it time then to expand and find new folks?
That's a really interesting question, because being a debut author affords you a lot of opportunities that, go away when you're not a debut author. A lot of blogs and podcasts or whatever. There's a lot of them that are designed for debut authors. And so what I'm hoping to learn between now and then, because the second book's not coming out till October of next year, is how to pitch myself to media outlets that I haven't pitched yet, that I don't know how to pitch yet. I have to find out, some of those like 20 best middle grade books to keep your eye on, that kind of thing. I'm taking every advantage that I can to get my story into the hands of anybody who is a writer about middle grade fiction, but it's not a very extensive list, as I said. I have been turned down by either turned down or just never heard back from, despite multiple follow-ups, which I'm very good at, as you know.
I do.
I would definitely attempt to go back to some of them. One of them that I pitched that I was dying to get an interview on, or a review, I just saw on their website, they decided you have to pay for it now. And I'm like, okay, cross that one out. I mean, people think you have to pay for publicity. Don't do it. Do not do it. That's marketing. That's what marketing and advertising are. Don't do it for publicity. You don't have to.
I have never charged an author, and this has never come up, but an author wanted to offer me money. That would be swell, please.
Well, and you put a lot of time in it. Yeah, I mean, it's but that, again, that's the thing about publicity, which is now called earned media, that's like the 2020 or 2018 or who knows when they thought that up. The jargon is I just laugh. But earned media has value over advertising, because earned media is what they're saying about you, and advertising is what you're saying about yourself. So it's kind of obvious why earned media is so valuable. And again, if you're paying for it, that's advertising. And
I should assure esteemed audience that, just joking, I would never charge authors. I wouldn't feel good about myself or the conversations that we're having. Okay. So I was curious. You sit down, you make out your publicity plan, you're starting to act on it, and then COVID-19 comes along and throws to the wind all of our plans for the year. How did that alter your publicity, and how does that alter writing and publicizing going forward for you?
Well, actually, I really feel like it's come to my advantage, because I love sitting here in this chair with my little camera looking at me and looking at you, and I don't have to there's a certain comfort level of being this sort of one-on-one that we're doing. I mean, that would have existed COVID or not, but sure. For example, for my launch party, I mean, I knew I was going to have a launch party. I knew where I wanted it to be. I knew I wanted it to be at that bookstore, Children's Book World in West LA. And, but I was really nervous about having people fill the room. And I knew my friends would come, so there would be people there. And standing up and, it's like, maybe I should get a podium so I can grab on. I mean, this is from a former actress, right? It's such a contradiction. And the idea of now being able to do all this stuff that I'm doing on the internet, is just, it works really well for my comfort level. Ultimately, I would like to go visit a school and talk to kids about my book, but I'm not ready for that yet. I'm doing all this sort of preparation right now by getting much more comfortable talking about myself, because a publicist is just, that's like the golden rule. You do not talk about yourself. You're not in front of the camera. If someone wants to take your picture, you politely decline. It's about the client. You want the client to be there. So being the client, me now being the client, I'm the client. So I got to be front and center. And COVID has given me a chance to practice and do these things. All the Zoom meetings for work that I do, it's like, I look, you can sort of see, make sure you have a nice background or whatever. How does that shirt that I'm wearing read on camera? Maybe not so much, whatever, you just get to do it. So, and in addition, even though I know this is many authors who had book signings and all this stuff, you know, they wouldn't agree with me. I didn't have any bookstore signings set up at the time of COVID. So they had to cancel things. They had things all over the country. I feel for them, you know, but I don't know. I just think it's been, it's opened up a lot of new opportunities. Authors are doing, you know, they're getting, I have a launch, you know, I have a second launch party with 3 other authors and a moderator that we're doing on Zoom. I'll probably be doing an interview on Instagram, you know, Instagram Live. And I've just been able to reach out to places that, and like that TikTok video, you know, that I don't know. I think that people are being super creative with COVID and reaching out to people that in a way that they probably, like this second launch party that I'm doing with, one of the authors is in Pennsylvania, another one's in Texas, another one's in wherever, North Carolina or something like that. You know, I wouldn't have even known them really, except for this debut group that I'm part of, this online debut group that might have existed. But all these opportunities, you know, where bookstores are inviting authors to come and do Zoom talks or Facebook talks or Instagram talks or whatever, those opportunities wouldn't have existed because the bookstores wouldn't have had to do that. But, you know, they're hurting a lot. So they're trying to sell books and you know, savvy authors are taking advantage of those opportunities. So it's comfortable for me, the idea of doing it this way. And I know I'll eventually get comfortable enough to attempt some kind of a book signing. I'm always afraid, like, what if no one shows up? That's like my biggest fear. So.
I can personally, I've done a very busy book signing, and I've done the nobody's there except my mom book signing, literally my mom. And you survive it. You pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, you say, well, I've got that experience. I have that anecdote if it ever comes up, and you know, you don't die.
Has anyone ever written a novel about being an author? And probably, I just have never heard of it.
There are so many books in the world, I'm sure. I'm sure.
I don't mean how-to books. I mean just like, you know, an author who, I'm sure, in fact, William Goldman, I feel like he wrote a book about that. So.
Sounds like it. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm watching our time, and I know that we're over. So I appreciate you being so generous with your time.
I'm having a wonderful time. Thank you so much for having me.
My last question is always some variation. This is especially interesting since I'm talking to you at the debut stage. So we'll have to meet up down the road a bit, and I'll ask you this again and see if it's changed. But if you could go back 20 years ago to you starting off on your journey with the Summer of Luck or anywhere in your writing career, if you could go back and give yourself some advice that would have been useful to you, made easier your path, and might do the same for everyone listening, what would you go back and tell yourself?
That's a really good question because I definitely have the answer. It took me 16 years to connect with other writers. I don't know what kept me back from doing that earlier. I have a friend, Kitty Feldy, very good friend of mine. She's also a middle grade author. She does the podcast for kids, the book club podcast for kids. She told me early on, get in a critique group, find other writers. And I'm like, no, I'm doing this myself. And that did not serve me at all. It just kept me, 20 years, because it was really, like I said, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I finally started doing that. That's what I would tell myself. Connect with other writers. Get as much input as you can from anybody who's willing to give it. You'll know when you don't need it anymore. That's how I knew that not from critique partners. I always need critique partners. I always need beta readers, but I don't need, to go on writers forums anymore and post my first chapter. I don't need to do that anymore because for Summer of Luck, I noticed that I was starting to get advice to change things that I knew didn't need to be changed anymore. And I knew that's when I was done getting that kind of information. But when you're starting a book or when you're in the process of it, if someone has some information to share with you, a reaction, as long as they're not telling you suck and as long as they're not telling you that you can't write and you need to stop, listen to what they're saying. You never know. So,
well, if they're saying that, I would posit they are the ones who suck. So there we are.
Also, the other thing is, just to give myself a break here, in 2000, 2001 or whatever, when my journey began, there was no whatever. Twitter, was there Twitter back then? I don't think so. There was an internet, but it wasn't like it is today. And that's also, there's all these resources now that there never were online. You'd have to go to a library or whatever. It's all there. Just check it out, read what other people are doing. Not just books. I mean, find an author to follow on Twitter or Facebook or somewhere and see, an author that you think is a worthy author to follow. And what are they doing? That's what I look to see. If somebody's got a story on some blog that I'd never heard of, I'm checking it out. If someone proposes that someone on this podcast or this blog is looking for authors to interview, I just do it because why not? Down the road, I'm sure I will be a little more, I won't be able to give as much time as some of the Q&As take. But right now I'm taking advantage of every opportunity that I can, as long as the blog isn't some poorly written, one follower on Twitter type writer, I mean, you have to start somewhere, but
you could reach that follower. That all makes a tremendous amount of sense. Laura, assuming that esteemed audience has heard you, they're excited, and they've decided you are the author that they want to follow. Where can they find you online, on Twitter, all that good stuff?
My website is laurastegman.com, and all my social links are there. I'm at Laura Stegman on Twitter. I'm at Laura_Stegman on Instagram. I'd love more Instagram followers. I have a lot on Twitter, but just building my Instagram. Laura Stegman Author on Facebook. And Goodreads. Summer of Luck is on Goodreads, so you can check it out and click that want to read box. And the Summer of Luck, of course, as we talked about, is available anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, Bookshop, and yeah, pretty much anywhere.
As always, for more of this wonderful, riveting content you've just enjoyed, head to middlegradeninja.com. Check out interviews with authors, literary agents, publishers, folks you'd be interested in. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. And as always, God willing, I'm alive, esteemed audience. I'll see you next week.